Right, welcome everybody. So we're about to begin today's session. So I'm going to ask everyone to just turn on your cameras so we can begin today's meeting. Thanks, Jose. Thanks, Jasmine, Rodrigo, Daniela, and David. You could. Yep. Thank you all. Okay, welcome to today's session. Today we're going to be looking at the listening section of the TOEFL exam. Yeah, basically what we're going to do today is basically just go through the structure of the section. We're going to see what kinds of audio recordings we're going to see, and basically, yeah, we're just going to discuss a bit of note taking, and yeah, just trying to get more familiar with the section. So before we begin, is there any question? Or are there any questions or comments perhaps that you want to make before we begin? All right, no questions then. Andres, I'm gonna need you to turn your camera, please. Okay, cheers. And yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to start sharing my screen to show you the slides I prepared for today. Sweet. Can everyone see the slides?
Yes, teacher.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, so the listening section is in terms of the order of the exam, the second section that you're going to face. You always begin the test with the reading section, which we saw last week for Jose, who just begun our course. We're going to be looking at it 5 weeks from now. So yeah, we're just going to start with the listening. So basically what I'm going to do is just basically give you a description of what the listening section is about, what kinds of questions, what kinds of passages we're going to face. And I'm going to give you some examples. So we're going to listen to one example of each kind of recording, basically. So we have three main recordings, three kinds of audio files. So yeah. All right. Oh, geez, it's a bit of a mistake there. Just give me a second. Sort it out. All right. Sweet. Yeah, I had a bit of a misspell there. So basically, what the TOEFL listening section is about is a section that measures how well you can understand spoken English in an academic environment. So it's going to be slightly different from for example, understanding English just on a social environment, like for example, as if you were talking to your friends, or probably at a party, or even, I don't know, you're watching movies and stuff. So it's useful to be used to how English sounds, but it has certain characteristics that the academic environment, in the academic environment, that actually make it a bit harder. For example, you have technical lingo. Andrea just joined us. Andrea, if you could turn on your camera, please, I would appreciate it.
Yes, 1 second, please.
Okay, all good. So yeah, basically that is the main difference with just listening in English in general, that because we're talking in an academic environment, some of the words are going to be quite technical. Some of the topics that we're going to be looking at are going to be quite technical. So you have to be basically very used to just basically a changing environment, because as the same as in the reading section, you're probably going to look into topics that you're not familiar with, that you haven't studied beforehand, or you know close to nothing about, which is good, because as we saw in the previous section, this is not a knowledge-based test. This is not measuring how well you know about a certain topic. This test is about how well you can communicate and you can transmit ideas and summarize ideas. So that's the main point of the listening section. You don't need any previous knowledge about the topic that is going to be discussed in the section. Just everything that you need is going to be given to you in the audio recording. So yeah, basically, as I mentioned already, they're going to give you different scenarios. We have 3 different scenarios in which each listening section is going to be divided in. So it's basically the lecture. Lecture is basically like a class where only one person is speaking, which is the professor. So this is usually the first section that you have. So you have a lecture, then you have the conversation, which is basically it's not a conversation between two people like on the same level as you have, for example, in the writing section, but it's always going to be like student with a member of faculty. I'm going to explain it with a bit more of details later on the presentation. But yeah, that's the second kind. And the third kind is a class discussion. So this is not necessarily like an argument, but it's more like a lecture that has other people that participate in this lecture. So those are the main 3 kinds of recordings that you're going to face. Usually, the listening section has 3 to 4 lectures with some classroom discussions, as I said. So you're going to get either 3 or 4 of them with six questions per 6 questions per section. So in these kinds of scenarios where you have either lectures or classroom discussions, you're always going to have six questions to answer, and between 2 or 3 conversations. These ones are shorter, around 3 minutes, with 5 questions each. So that's basically how the listening section is divided. We're going to have, usually the standard one is just 3 lectures and 2 conversations that you're going to listen to in order, and you have an allocated time of 41 minutes. But as in the reading section, this can vary because they can introduce an experimental section, which usually is people at ETS trying out new combinations or new methodologies, or perhaps different topics. So they're testing them out with the students. So yeah, in case you get an extra lecture or an extra conversation, your time is going to be basically increased to 57 minutes. And yeah, the same as in the reading section, if you get an experimental one, that experimental one is not going to be counted into your final grade. But the tricky part is that you actually don't know which one is the experimental one. So my suggestion, as always, is that you tackle all of the lectures and all of the conversations as if they were graded, because it's really, really hard to figure out which one is the experimental one. So yeah, basically that's it. If you get an extra one, just try to answer all of them in the same manner, regardless of whether they're experimental or regular one. So yeah, usually you have as I said before, between 41 to 57 minutes. So pacing is quite important. It's not necessarily an issue as in the reading section, as we're going to discuss later on, because basically you're paced by a different kind of chronometer. But yeah, like pacing is something that you have to be mindful of. Like you have to be mindful of how long you're taking per question. We're going to have a more in detail discussion about different allocations of time, how these 41 or 57 minutes are distributed. So yeah, this is basically what the listening section is about. Are there any questions, perhaps, before we begin? Or any doubts about this part? Sweet. No questions? All clear? All right. If at any point anyone has a doubt or a question, you can just ask. Okay. So we're going to just move on. Cool. So what are the keys for this section? What going to guarantee us basically to get the best grade possible, basically. First one, as I said, is being mindful of the time we have allocated for each section. We have a limited time, just slightly shorter than in the reading section. It's not that short, but yeah, you usually have more recordings to look into. So always be mindful. Just don't let time run you over. Basically, just always be. Just keep track of time. Like how long is it taking, or how long you have left. Whenever you're answering this section, in the upper part of your screen, you're going to have a chronometer or a timer that's going to tell you basically how much longer you have left in this section. So yeah, just keep looking at it, keep making notes of it, and yeah, basically just see how many questions you have left. You already know that if it's a lecture, you have 6 questions, and if it's a conversation, you have 5 questions. So yeah, it's good. Another thing that's really advisable is to take effective notes. Means just basically try to point out what the main topics of the listening section are about. Like, for example, what it is about, what are the main points that they make, or certain details that you may find interesting. This is a really good practice, but I personally don't use it. I find it too distracting to be taking notes while I listen to each of the recordings. But that's basically more a personal problem, because I have ADHD, so I just get really confused and distracted if I take notes while I listen to things. So in my case, it works better if I just concentrate exclusively on listening to what they're saying, and because they're not that long, it's relatively easy to just basically gather all the main details. But yeah, no, that's only if you struggle with note taking. But the main point of this section, and what's advisable, is that you take notes. Don't try to just basically transcribe everything that's being said. That's not efficient. You're going to get confused. Just work on just basically getting the main points. Just do like a bullet point, perhaps, or just extract the main ideas. Just write in like really short sentences. Don't add any unnecessary information. Like, for example, all the connectors, perhaps between the phrases or the sentences. Just don't write them down. Just write the main things. Just write like main words, keywords. Identify the keywords. It's also really important for the reading section as well. But in this part, because you cannot go back to the recording it's good that you have a good yeah, some good notes that you can look back into in case you have some doubts. So yeah, practice taking notes. Practice. I'm going to give you some exercises. Today we're going to be listening to 3 examples of each kind of recording. So just try to take notes while you're listening to the thing. So because I'm going to ask some questions to see if you understood what each recording was about. So try to practice your note taking while you do this and see if you get confused or if you miss some information. It's better to do it in this scenario, because basically we're just practicing, we're just getting used to it. And yeah, just get as much practice done as you can. And the third main key for this section, in my opinion, this is the most important one, is basically you have to concentrate on understanding what the purpose of the conversation or the lecture is. What the author, because don't forget that these are not what do you call impromptu conversations. Like, they're always planned, they're always scripted. So they always talk about a certain topic. They don't go into like 2 or 3 different topics. They always go on a certain topic. Even the conversations, they always discuss, or the interactions are always about one specific topic. So yeah, basically concentrate on trying to understand what this concept is and what the purpose of the author was on this section, and you're going to do great. Yeah, that's basically it. Just keep track of your time, take notes that are as efficient as possible. It means try not to waste too much time, or just stop paying attention to what you're listening to just because you're taking notes, which is my problem. And yeah, concentrate on what the main topic is. What is the author trying to tell you, basically? In my opinion, this is the easiest section of them all. It's even easier than the reading section, because information is shorter, the questions are shorter as well, and they're more to the point. I think when I took my TOEFL exam, I got 30 out of 30 on this one. It's really easy. This is one that where you can basically maximize your possibilities of getting a really good grade, in case I know you're not feeling too confident with the other sections. So yeah, those are my main advices basically on how to tackle this section. Any questions or comments? All right, we're a bit quiet today. We're not interacting too much, but okay, so it's okay. It's been a long weekend. We're all, well, for Jose is not from Bolivia. So in Bolivia we had holiday yesterday, so we're just getting back to work, basically, about work and study. So yeah, probably that's why. And yeah, so yeah, let's move on. If we have any more questions. All right, so this is a little division that I made of what the allocated time for this section that we have is. So basically, we're going to be working on the standard distribution of a listening section. Basically, it's when you have 3 lectures and 2 conversations. Is it? Yeah, 3 lectures and 2 conversations. So basically, the allocated time for this section, if you have the standard version, if you don't have any experimental sections added, is 41 minutes. We're going to be working with this one because it's the most common one, but this also works with the experimental ones. So usually at the beginning of each recording, you're going to listen to some instructions. So they're going to basically be setting the scene. They're going to say some things like, I don't know, is a lecture on a philosophy class, for example, or this is a conversation between a student and a member of I don't know, faculty. I don't know, they're just going to be basically setting what the scene is. So usually, as an aggregated of the 5 different recordings that we're going to be listening to, usually each of these instructions add to like 3.5 minutes, 3.5 minutes. So yeah, they are very short, but they still take some time of your like total allocated time. Usually the lectures are not that long. So in total, for all 5 of them, between lectures and conversations, basically the time allocated is around 21 minutes. And that gives you basically 16.5 minutes to answer all your questions. So the 41 minutes, even though it's pretty long, you're not basically able to use all 41 minutes to answer your questions, which is the opposite case of the reading section, in which you could go straight for the questions and just basically use all the time allocated and trying to just basically get every question down. This one, you basically, when the listening section is on, there you cannot do anything but listen and take notes, basically. One important thing is whenever there's a lecture, because sometimes there's like 2 recordings in one section. So whenever there's a recording playing, basically the timer is going to disappear, and yeah, it's not going to deduct time out of your answering time. Basically, those 16.5 minutes, which are distributed in all the sections that you're going to be given, basically they do not consider the time for the lectures and the audio tracks, basically. So yeah, it's just those 16.5 minutes are the exact time you have to answer all the questions, and you always have a countdown timer on the top of your screen. Okay, so yeah, this is basically how this timing, what the breakdown of this timing is. And yeah, no, it sounds pretty challenging, just basically having only 16 minutes to answer all of the questions for like 5 passages. But it's actually not. It's much easier than what it seems. You just have to have a good strategy, which we're going to be discussing next slide. But before we continue, I'm going to ask again, do you have any questions or any doubts regarding this section?
Very sorry, teacher. Good afternoon. I just didn't understand the part of the time for lectures and audio tracks. It says that on screen timer will not count it. What do you mean by that? Like,
yeah, so
the countdown is like is gonna stop, or
yeah,
or I don't.
So basically, whenever you're answering the questions, you're going to have a timer on the top of your screen. Usually it tells you like how much time you have left for each passage, basically. So they give you between like 6 to 9 minutes, sometimes depending on how long the lecture or the conversation was and how many questions you have. So yeah, you usually have like a timer there that basically lets you know how long you have left. But whenever they add, for example, like an audio track or a lecture or a conversation, that timer goes away. So it's not going to be shown in your screen anymore. And that means that it's stopped, basically. So sometimes they give you like another conversation within the same section, like or like the complement of a conversation. So if you have like a recording in the middle of all your questions, basically that time is not counted. So that's what I meant by it. So whenever your timer disappears off your screen, yeah, they're not measuring that time. I don't know if that answers your question, David.
Yeah, thank you very much. You got it completely.
Sweet. So yeah, that's basically how this section is distributed. Do you have any more questions? All right. Cool then. So what is the basic pacing strategy? As I told you, time is usually not a problem in this section. It's less of a problem than in the reading section, I think. Well, in my opinion, you need a better pacing strategy for the reading section than you do for this one, because usually the questions, as we saw last week, and as we're going to see in the next reading section, basically the kinds of questions that they ask you in the reading section are more about comprehension, basically saying how well you can summarize like long pieces of text. And it usually takes quite a lot of time to just go back, for example, as we saw in the practice, go back to the section that they are indicating. For example, when they say in paragraph 3, what they mean by this, you have to go back to paragraph 3 and you have to read it again, and you have to read what the sentences before that were, or the sentences after that, to give you more context about what they're referring to. Or for example, just when they ask you to summarize like what the main things, you have to just basically go look for them and just check in the text. So that usually takes more time, but because in this one you can't listen to the audio track again. Basically, they're going to play it once and that's it. You cannot listen to it again. So that's why it's important to take notes. So because you cannot listen to it again, basically you just have the questions and you have nothing but your notes to revise, basically, and it usually takes less time. And the questions themselves are usually shorter. Like they're meant to be answered in an average of 30 seconds, perhaps 30 to 20 seconds. Shouldn't take you more than that. So especially the short ones. We're going to see all the types of questions on Thursday, but I'm just basically mentioning some stuff. So yeah, don't worry too much about time. There's always time for these questions because you have less questions. You remember you used to have 10 questions for the reading one. For this one, you have between 6 or 5. So you have less questions. The questions are not as complex. So yeah, usually timing is not a problem. But in case you actually run out of time, or for example, you see your timer getting dangerously low, basically the main thing you can do is just trust your instinct. You've heard the thing, even if you didn't take like the best notes ever, like if your notes are not as good as you would like them to be, because sometimes you don't know what they're going to ask you, right? So you don't know exactly what to look for. That's the main difference with the reading section. The reading section, you actually go and look for the exact thing that they're asking you to look for. Because in this one, you're basically going in blind. Sometimes you forget to annotate some details, for example. So in case that happens, just trust your instinct, guess and move on. Don't, for example, and this is only like a last resort. For example, if you have like 10 seconds left and you still have 2 questions to answer, yeah, basically you have higher chances of getting a better grade if you answer both of them than if you only answer one correctly, even if one of them is not correct. So yeah, basically, if you're running out of time, you have like 10 seconds left and you still have 2 questions, just guess and move to the next one. Just try to finish all of them correctly. If you answer a question, you're more likely to get it right than if you don't, right? So always try to answer all of the questions. Yeah, just choose the option that looks more familiar. Choose one that actually resonates with what you heard, even if you don't know the exact detail they're asking about. Just basically choose the one that's more familiar. And another good trick is that whenever they give you too many options, usually they add some information that wasn't mentioned in the lecture or in the conversation before, but I don't know, has some relation to it. So it could be easy to deduce that it was mentioned perhaps. But yeah, just be really clear on what was mentioned and what wasn't mentioned. So usually if they say something that wasn't mentioned in the lecture or in the conversation, but you probably know you can deduce from it, that's most likely not the right question. So most of the wrong questions usually add some options that were not included in the original passage. Do you have any questions about this pacing strategy or the information basically that we're going through? Nope. Nothing. Okay, sweet. Right.
Teacher,
So we're going to, yep, David.
just a question. I don't know if I get it, but what you're saying is like, while we are listening, they don't show us the questions, right? Like,
Yep.
Like by the time they are playing it, we have to take notes, as you said, and then they're gonna show us. I mean, the TOEFL exam is gonna show us the questions, right?
Yes. And you cannot replay the recording. You're only going to hear it once. So yeah, that's basically how they do it. They give you the recording first. Once it finishes, then they give you all the questions and the time to answer.
Okay, thank you very much.
Teacher,
Yes,
can we go back to a question that we answered before and change or not?
I think that in this section you cannot go back. So yeah, yeah, I'm pretty sure that in this one you can't go back. In the reading one you can, and this one, yeah, basically once you answer, you cannot go back usually.
Okay, thank you.
So good. Any more questions, perhaps? Cool. So we're going to basically look at the 3 types of recordings that we have. So the first one, and the first one that you usually going to encounter, which is like 99% of all cases, is the lecture. Basically, what is a lecture? A lecture is a recording of a class where only one person is talking, which is the professor. It says this is usually the longest type of recording that you're going to be facing. It can vary anywhere between 4 to 6 minutes. It's usually only 5 minutes long. Like on average, it's closer to 5, but it can go a bit longer than that, but no more than 6 minutes. That's basically the limit of this recording, basically. So as I said, there's only one person talking, so only one person to listen to, which is the professor. They're going to be explaining a topic that's quite similar to the ones we saw on the reading section. That's basically going to be something about, like, I don't know, like biology or natural sciences or social sciences, sometimes some economics, some philosophy, some art history. Those are the main topics that they like to use for this kind of lectures. So yeah, you have some illustrations, like whenever you're looking at your reading section, you usually have like a little image that's going to be presented on the screen. There's going to be nothing on the screen but that image. And sometimes it's just a picture of, like, for example, a professor just talking in a class. It's not going to be a video. So just like a picture, like one of those stock pictures of just a professor teaching. But yeah, but in this lecture, sometimes they can also add some keywords, for example, some keywords or some main things that they're talking about, or some diagrams and illustrations. I don't know if you know what diagrams are. Like, for example, in the example that we're going to be looking at, for example, they talk about graphite, and they show like a picture of graphite and its molecular distribution. So yeah, sometimes these diagrams or these keywords are complementary to the listening section. So they complement some information. So it's important to also look at the screen and just see what the pictures are. But on a regular basis, you can answer all of the questions without looking at the pictures. But yeah, sometimes they use some supporting images. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you an example of a lecture. And yep, so it's here in this part. So we're going to go to the lecture part. So I'm going to play it, and this is what it usually sounds like. So let me know if you have any problems listening to what it says, basically.
Sorry, I can listen.
I don't know if it's
Me
me,
neither.
but I don't really listen.
Okay, so are we having problems listening to the thing? Okay, so I think
So, what is an allotrope then?
it's better now.
Well, these are all different forms of the same basic element. Take carbon. Just be patient. Introductory classes are for. There's some pretty fundamental elemental properties.
Here is the lecture.
So we're going
Before we go any further talking about elemental properties, we should briefly introduce allotropes in case anybody here isn't completely familiar with the topic. Now, this is some pretty fundamental stuff, but I recognize that not everybody here has studied chemistry seriously before. That's what these introductory classes are for, right? So, just by a show of hands, how many of you here are familiar with the word allotrope? All right, great. So, that looks like about half of you. Well, we won't spend too much time on this, so just be patient with me if it's all old news for you. I'll try not to bore you too much. Okay, so what is an allotrope then? Well, these are all different forms of the same basic element. Take carbon, for example. You're probably all aware of the idea that if you take a lump of coal, an ordinary black piece of coal, the same stuff that we burn for fuel, and squeeze it hard enough, you'll create a diamond. Now, that's not actually possible. You couldn't create diamonds from coal. Not by pressure alone, at least. But the basic idea behind it does have a grain of truth. So what do coal and diamonds have in common? Where does that idea come from? Well, those are two allotropes of carbon. Coal isn't exactly an allotrope, but it's made of one. It's made of amorphous carbon mostly. That's carbon without a clear shape. There's assorted other matter mixed in there, but that carbon is the most important component. But at the same time, diamonds are also made up of carbon. But they're clearly quite different from coal, right? How is that? How can two things, both made almost completely from one element, be so distinct, so noticeably different from each other? That's the magic of allotropes. Let's go back to coal for a moment. If you take out all of the other things that can be in coal, those impurities, then what's left is just that amorphous carbon. And if you look at a picture of a diagram of the structure, you'll see that the carbon atoms are all bonded in this scattered, disorganized way. This shapelessness, the lack of organization, is also displayed in large pieces, not just when looking at something as small as molecules. Coal isn't very well formed, is it? True amorphous carbon is just powder. You don't get the same kinds of flat surfaces with sharp corners that you get from diamonds. And that's because, in part, at a molecular level, this material is just not very well structured. But that organization of atoms, or that lack of organization really, also affects the chemical properties in other ways. One of the most obvious differences here is color. Coal is black or dark gray, while diamonds are, of course, transparent, totally clear. Well, those differences are because of the changes in molecular structure. Compared to that loose, random makeup of coal, diamond is very, very well structured. The atoms are arranged evenly and consistently, as you can see. And that different organization of atoms within the material makes for a completely different substance. Now, you might be thinking that's because coal is so impure, as I mentioned earlier. That is, the other components of coal might affect the color and consistency of the material. And that's true to some extent. But if we take a look at graphite, we can see that it's not just the inclusion of other elements, non-carbon atoms. Graphite is also made of pure carbon. I mean, compared to coal, it's quite pure. Again, we're really just talking about one element here. But the molecular construction is, once again, a bit different. Graphite is also very well organized, but it doesn't form crystals like diamonds do. Instead, it forms in sheets, layers. By the way, these layers separate from each other very easily, which is why graphite is so soft and, of course, why we use it in pencils. It rubs onto paper well because it is so soft. And that's what defines an allotrope. Different structures of the same element. Those three, coal, graphite, and diamonds, those three are all allotropes of carbon. Knowing the elements alone doesn't tell us very much about the physical material. We also need to know its structure.
Right. So that was an example of a lecture. So who can tell me what was it about? It wasn't about carbon per se. It was about allotropes, right? So yeah, so you have to be really mindful of those details. That even though they mention carbon and diamonds and graphite as examples of the distribution of these allotropes, it's not about the carbon. It's not about the element per se. It's about these structures. So yeah. And one thing that you may have noticed as well is that the lecture doesn't have like a really clear accent. So they do it on purpose. They can sometimes give you like American accents or British accents, or God forbid, Australian accents or New Zealand accents, which are really hard to understand sometimes. I can attest to that. I did my master's in New Zealand and it was awful sometimes. So hopefully you'll get American or British accents, which are more palatable basically. And you also saw the use of the diagrams, right? How they explain things, the allotropes with carbon and diamond and graphite as well. So that's it's not essential, but it's useful. Right? Now moving on to the conversation. Basically, as I mentioned, these ones are shorter. You may encounter between 2 or 3 of these in your exam. These are between 2 to 4 minutes long, so considerably shorter than the 6 minutes that we just heard. And it's always a student with one university staff member. So it could be like an employee or someone from like, I don't know, like a specific department, or it could be a professor, or it could be like an RA perhaps. So it's always one student and one university staff. Okay. Now here they show you some pictures as well, but the main difference with the lectures that these pictures actually don't add any relevant information. They just show you the people basically. They just show you who is talking to whom. And yeah, it basically gives you something to focus on. So now what we're going to do is we're going to listen to another example of those. So yep, I'm going to share this again, and yep, it's this one. Right.
Now listen to a conversation between a student and his professor. Okay, let's hear it.
Professor Schmidt, sorry to interrupt. Do you have a moment? Hmm? Oh, hi, Alan. Please come in, come in. What can what brings you to my office?
It's just, okay. Well, after class yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
I was talking with Amy Mahone, who sits next to me,
Right.
and she mentioned that she'd been talking with a couple of the others in the class. And I don't want to point a finger, but, it sounded like they were talking pretty negatively about me.
Ah, gossip. I can understand how that could be troubling.
It is. I guess I just don't know what to do about it. They didn't like my critique specifically, so I thought you might be able to help, since it's really about how we've been interacting in class, reading one another's essays and discussing them. Maybe you could talk with them, or I don't know.
Well, I'm not really experienced in mediation, you know? I don't know if me talking with these other students would really help all that much. I'm afraid I might just make matters worse, but I might be able to give some advice.
Really, I'd appreciate just about anything. It all feels so childish. I don't know how to react.
It might help to think of it a bit differently. Try to see it from their point of view. Do you know exactly what made them so upset?
Yeah, that's just it. Apparently, they said I was really arrogant, that I thought I was better than everybody else. But I don't think that. Not at all.
So where do you think that idea came from?
Well, I guess I've been pretty critical in my responses to other students' essays during our workshop classes.
That sounds like a start.
But if I don't give my honest opinion, then how will anybody know how to improve? If nobody talks about the problems of an essay, it will just stay the same. That's not the point of the workshop, is it?
You might be right, but maybe that's not how everybody sees it. There are many people who think the most productive comments, the reactions that help us to improve the most, are the positive ones.
But, I mean, I think I learned the most from the real criticisms, not the praise. But I guess I could tell everybody that before my next workshop. If I ask for stronger criticism on my writing, maybe people won't be upset about my comments on their essays.
I think that's a great idea. Now, I'm sorry, Alan, but if I'm going to finish grading these tests before the weekend, I should probably get back to work. Do you mind?
No, not at all. I'm sorry I came in without an appointment like this. I hope you understand.
Of course. I just hope I was able to help a bit.
Right. So that was an example of a conversation. So as you see, they also have one topic in mind. They don't talk about like different things. In this case, the student was having some problems with his classmates. Basically, they've been gossiping and they've been basically having some bad reactions to him, appearing to be arrogant. So yeah, this is usually how it's going to look like. You're going to have 5 questions about this. Basically, they're going to ask you about some details. So it's good that you take notes on this. And yeah, it's shorter than the lecture, it has less information than the lecture, but it could also be quite tricky to answer sometimes. Okay, and finally, the last kind of recording that you can face is the classroom discussion. So usually this one, more than, as I said before, more than a discussion, this is a lecture that has some other people participating. So usually it's the professor and 2 to 3 other students that participate. This one is also between 4 to 6 minutes long. Again, it's also about an academic topic. It's really similar to the lecture, but here you have some students that ask questions or make comments, or sometimes the professor asks them questions. So yeah, there's an interaction with other people that you have to be mindful of. And yeah, also you see some pictures that work the same way as they do in the lecture recording, basically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example as well. If you give me a second, I'll share it. week. So
Now, listen to part of a lecture in a poetry class. And here's our discussion.
All right, so we're going to move on to a new project today. I know that everybody enjoyed writing structured poems when we worked on this villanelles last month, so I wanted to return to that. We're not going to be writing more villanelles though. Instead, we're going to work on something that I think will be a unique experience for everybody here, something you haven't tried before. Has anybody heard of a sestina before? Anybody? Dora, you look like you have something to say.
Well, I have heard of it before, but only because my friend Tim took your class last semester and told me about it.
That's all right. I guess I should expect that if I assign the same type of poem 2 semesters in a row. Why don't you tell us what you know about it anyway, Dora?
Sure. So I remember that there are 6 stanzas, 6 parts of the poem, and each of those 6 stanzas has 6 lines. I can remember because seis means 6 in Spanish. And so sestina has 6 groups of 6 lines. I guess it's a Spanish type of poem?
You're very close, but not quite. It's actually a very old form of poem, older than the Spanish you're learning in class. The first sestina we know of was written in Occitanian, a language that's related to Spanish, but is completely distinct. Well, let's not get stuck talking about the history of the form. It's really the organization, the pattern it follows, that we're going to be working with. So, as Dora said, the first stanza of the poem is made of 6 lines, as are most of the other stanzas. And yes, there are 6 stanzas too. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just look at that first stanza. There's actually not much to say about this. There are very few rules. The lines don't have to rhyme, and there is no set length you have to use.
Professor? Sorry, but I thought you said we were going to work with another structured type of poem. If there's no rhyming, then we can just use any word we want, right? That sounds easy.
That's a great question, David, but I haven't yet talked about the second stanza. Things are about to become a little complicated, so please bear with me. Looking at that first stanza, we're going to take the end words from each line. Let's assign letters to each end word. The first line ends with word A, the second line finishes with word B, the third line ends with C, and so on. Now, the second stanza makes things more difficult. You're going to use the same 6 end words to finish the 6 lines of the second stanza. But this time, the order will be different. Rather than using A, B, C, D, E, F, the lines will end using F, A, E, B, D, C. And the third stanza, well, it will also have a very specific order, using the same exact end words again. I'm going to hand out a worksheet in a moment, which shows the total organization of the poem. So don't worry too much if this looks a bit confusing. What I want to stress is that each line must end with a specific word. You have no choice about how to organize the end words.
Okay, I see. So we actually have to repeat the same words a lot.
Exactly. You're going to use those same 6 end words to end every line of the poem. That makes for a lot of repetition. You'll have to choose which words you use carefully. If you pick 6 very rare words to use as those end words, then it will be hard to repeat them in every stanza. Let's say I use the word elbow to end the first line of my poem. Because of this very strict form, I'm going to have to use the word elbow 5 more times, and that might be a bit difficult. But at the same time, if you choose 6 common words, the reader, or the listener if you're reading the poem out loud, might not even hear the repetition of the word. If I end my first line with the word me, it might not be very interesting. Saying me 5 more times won't be all that noticeable. And that's why we're going to try this form. I want all of you to start thinking about how repetition like this affects your writing. I think you'll get some interesting reactions to poems you create.
So basically, that's what the classroom discussion sounds like. So as you may have noticed, it's like a lecture. So yeah, those are the main three types of recordings that you're going to be encountering during this test. All right, so while I launch the daily poll, yeah, I'm going to ask all of you to answer it. And do you have any questions or any comments, perhaps, regarding the different examples that we saw today, or the listening session in general? So yeah, as you may have seen, it's actually not that hard. It's basically pretty centered on just one topic. That's the main difference with the reading section. In the reading section, you have you have different topics that they discuss on each paragraph, whereas in this one they basically go on the same thing. So yeah, just be mindful of your time, be mindful of the main points, and just work on your note-taking techniques, basically. So I think, yeah, we have one person that hasn't answered the poll. Yeah, I think we're done now. So yeah, do we have any questions or any comments before we close today's session?
Teacher, will
Yep.
we see the questions and answers of this passage, these recordings tomorrow, or no? Or these are only examples?
These are only examples. I'm going to use the questions for these passages for the methodology part on Thursday. So tomorrow and Friday, we're going to be working with different recordings. Okay, so I'm going to prepare different exercises as well. I'm going to be sharing my screen, and then I'm going to give you a PDF with the questions.
Okay.
So we're going to be working with different audios, basically.
Okay, thank you.
All good. Anyone else? All right, cool beans. Then if we don't have any more questions, that'll be all for today. Tomorrow we're going to do our first practices of the listening section. I'm going to be preparing some audio tracks and some questions as well. I'm going to give you tomorrow before as we begin the class. So yeah, see you all tomorrow and have a good rest of the night.